The auditorium was silent as Jamal Carter's fingers hovered over the piano keys. The same piano Principal Higgins had forced him to play as a joke. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the awkward fumbling of a boy who'd never had a lesson. But when his hands finally moved, the entire school would learn the truth. Some talents can't be mocked, only witnessed. What happened next would shatter expectations, expose hidden lies, and ignite a fire that would burn far beyond these walls. From which country are you enjoying this story? Please make sure to tell us in the comments. Subscribe now, because this is just the beginning.
The auditorium hummed with restless energy, a sea of students shifting in their seats, half listening to another dull assembly at Westridge Prep. At the edge of the stage, Principal Higgins adjusted his tie, his smile sharp as a knife. He loved moments like these, moments where he could remind certain students of their place. His eyes landed on Jamal Carter. Jamal sat near the back, shoulders slightly hunched, like he was trying to take up less space. He wasn't like the other kids at Westridge. No trust fund, no family name, just a scholarship and a mother who worked double shifts to keep him here. Higgins had never liked that. Scholarships were for diversity points, not for kids who actually belonged. So when the microphone screeched and Higgins cleared his throat, the room fell silent out of habit. "Before we wrap up," he said, voice dripping with false cheer, "we've got a little special performance today." A few students perked up. Talent shows were usually reserved for seniors or orchestra kids, not random Wednesday assemblies. Higgins gestured toward the grand piano sitting untouched at center stage. "Jamal Carter, why don't you come up here and show us what you've got?" A beat of silence. Then, scattered laughter. Jamal didn't move. The piano had been sitting there all week, a prop for the upcoming spring concert. No one had asked Jamal to play. No one even knew if he could play. That was the point. Higgins' grin widened. "Come on, don't be shy. I heard you're quite the musician." Another lie. Jamal had never mentioned music. He barely spoke at all. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A few phones lifted, recording. They all knew what this was. Another one of Higgins' little power plays. Last month, he'd made a transfer student recite Shakespeare in front of the whole school just to watch him stumble. The video got 50K likes on TikTok. Jamal's fingers tightened around the edge of his seat. Then, slowly, he stood up. The laughter died. Because Jamal wasn't supposed to go along with it. He was supposed to freeze, to mumble an excuse, to give Higgins the satisfaction of watching him squirm. But Jamal walked forward, step steady, face unreadable. Higgins' smile flickered. The piano bench creaked as Jamal sat down. He didn't look at the keys, didn't crack his knuckles or take a deep breath like nervous performers did. He just stared at his hands for a second, like he was remembering something. Then he played. The first note was soft, a single key pressed, the sound lingering in the dead silence. The second note came faster, then a third. Within seconds, his hands were moving in a blur, fingers flying across the keys like they had a mind of their own. The melody wasn't something from a textbook. It wasn't Beethoven or Bach. It was something wilder, something that made the hair on the back of necks stand up. The room stopped breathing. Because Jamal wasn't just playing. He was telling a story. The music swelled, notes crashing like waves, then dropping into something so quiet it hurt. Students leaned forward without realizing it. A teacher dropped her clipboard. Higgins' mouth hung open. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it ended. Jamal's hands lifted from the keys. The silence that followed was louder than the music. No one clapped. No one moved. They were all still trapped in whatever spell Jamal had just cast. Until a single voice from the back row whispered, "Asterisk, what the hell was that?" Asterisk. And the room exploded. The chaos in the auditorium took nearly 10 minutes to settle. Students stood on chairs, phones still raised, shouting over each other to be heard. Teachers exchanged glances, some impressed, others uneasy. No one had expected this. Least of all Principal Higgins. He stood frozen near the stage steps, his carefully styled hair slightly mussed from how many times he'd run a hand through it in disbelief. His plan had been simple. Call Jamal up, watch him fumble, maybe get a laugh out of the student body. A harmless little reminder that scholarship kids didn't really belong at Westridge. But this was a problem. Because Jamal hadn't just played. He had destroyed that piano in a way Higgins had only ever seen professionals do. And worse, the entire school had witnessed it. At the center of it all, Jamal sat quietly on the piano bench, staring at his hands like even he wasn't sure what had just happened. His heart still pounded from the adrenaline, his fingers tingling with the ghost of the keys. He hadn't meant to play like that. He hadn't meant to play at all. But when Higgins had smirked at him, when the laughter had started, something inside him had snapped. Jamal! A hand landed on his shoulder, making him flinch. Mr. Delaney, the music teacher, stood over him, his usual stern expression replaced with something like awe. Where did you learn to play like that? Jamal opened his mouth, then closed it. That was the question, wasn't it? Because the truth was, he hadn't learned, that is. Not in the way people expected. The first time he'd touched a piano, he'd been 6 years old, waiting in the lobby of his mother's office building after school. There'd been an old upright shoved in the corner, out of tune and forgotten. He'd pressed a key, just to hear the sound. Then another. Then, without thinking, his hands had moved on their own, copying a song he'd heard in a commercial earlier that day. His mother had nearly dropped her paperwork when she came out to find him playing. Asterisk, Jamal, when did you take lessons? Asterisk. He hadn't. That was the thing. He didn't need lessons. Music just made sense. Like his hands already knew what to do before his brain caught up. But try explaining that to people. Try explaining it to Higgins, who was now storming toward him, face red with something that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't not anger either. Office. Now. The command cut through the noise. Students fell silent as Jamal stood, shoulders tense, and followed Higgins out of the auditorium. Behind them, whispers erupted. Asterisk. Did you record that? Asterisk. Asterisk. No way that was real. He must have faked it. Asterisk. Asterisk. Since when does Jamal Carter play piano? Asterisk. None of them saw the way Jamal's hands trembled at his sides. The hallway walk. The walk to Higgins' office was long. The hallways too quiet now that classes had started. Jamal kept his eyes on the floor, counting tiles to keep his breathing steady. He knew what was coming, knew how this worked. Higgins didn't like being shown up, especially not by a kid he pegged as an easy target. The office door slammed shut behind them. Higgins didn't sit, just paced behind his desk, fingers tapping against his thigh like he was still hearing the echoes of Jamal's performance. Care to explain that? Jamal stayed silent. Because here's what I know, Higgins continued, voice low. Jamal Carter, 12 years old. No prior music training. No piano listed on your scholarship application. So tell me, how does a kid like you play like that? Jamal swallowed. I just can. Higgins barked a laugh. Asterisk, you just can. Asterisk, he leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. Let me guess. You've been hiding this? Sneaking into the music room after hours? No. Jamal had never touched a piano at Westridge before today. The one in the auditorium had been his first time. But admitting that would only make things worse. People didn't like it when you couldn't explain things. They liked it even less when those things made you special. So Jamal said nothing. Higgins exhaled sharply, straightening. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep this little talent of yours to yourself. No performances. No showing off. Because let's be honest, kids like you don't get to be the star here. Understand? Kids like him. Scholarship kids. Black kids. Jamal understood just fine. He nodded. Higgins smiled, satisfied. Good. Now get to class. The recording. What Jamal didn't know, what Higgins didn't know, was that someone had recorded it. Ethan Cole, a sophomore with a habit of filming anything he thought might go viral, had gotten every second. And by third period, the video had already been texted to half the school. By lunch, it was trending. The video started spreading during fourth period. At first, it was just a few shares. Westridge students texting their friends at other schools with messages like, "You gotta see this," or asterisk, "No way this is real." Asterisk by lunch, it had hit Twitter. By the final bell, it was on TikTok with 500,000 views and climbing. Jamal didn't notice. He spent the rest of the day with his head down, ignoring the whispers that followed him through the halls. He could feel the stares, the way people looked at him like he'd grown a second head. He just kept moving, slipping into the back of classrooms, avoiding eye contact. Higgins, on the other hand, noticed immediately. His phone started buzzing halfway through his fifth period meeting. At first, he ignored it. Then the buzzing became constant. Emails, texts, notifications from the school's social media accounts. By the time he finally checked, his stomach dropped. There it was. Jamal's performance. Clear as day. Filmed from the front row. The audio crisp enough to hear every note. And the caption? Asterisk, principal tries to embarrass a student. It backfires hard. Asterisk. The comments were worse. Asterisk, bro played like he's been hiding a Grammy this whole time. Asterisk. Asterisk, this kid's a prodigy and that principal looks like he's about to have a stroke. Asterisk. Asterisk, someone get this kid a record deal. Asterisk. Higgins' fingers tightened around his phone. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jamal was supposed to be a joke, a quick laugh for the student body before everyone moved on. Now the entire internet was laughing at him. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. He needed damage control. Fast. Ethan Cole's regret. Ethan hadn't meant for it to blow up like this. He just wanted to post something funny, something to get a few likes. He hadn't expected this. By the time he was called to the principal's office, the video had already been reposted by 3 major meme pages. Higgins didn't yell. That was almost worse. He just sat there, fingers steepled, staring at Ethan like he was trying to decide how much trouble to make his life. Take it down. Ethan shifted in his seat. I can't. It's already everywhere. Other people have reposted it. Higgins' jaw twitched. Then you're going to make a statement. Say it was staged. A prank. Anything to make this go away. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He could lie. But the thing was, he didn't want to. He'd seen the way Higgins had smirked when he called Jamal up. He'd heard the whispers, the laughter. And yeah, maybe he'd filmed it for the wrong reasons at first, but after seeing Jamal play, no way was he calling that fake. I don't think I can do that, Ethan said quietly. Higgins' expression darkened. The practice room. Jamal didn't go home after school. He couldn't face his mom yet, not when he had no idea how to explain what had happened. Instead, he found himself outside the music wing, staring at the door to the practice rooms. He'd never been inside before. He pushed the door open. The room was small, soundproof, with an old upright piano shoved against the wall. He sat down, hands hovering over the keys. He shouldn't be here. Higgins had made that clear. But for the first time all day, his fingers didn't feel restless. He played. Softly this time. No crashing chords. No showy runs. Just something quiet. Something for himself. He didn't hear the door open. Didn't realize he wasn't alone until a voice said, "That's not how most people play Mozart." Jamal's hands froze. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, dark-skinned, with sharp eyes and a salt and pepper beard. He wore a suit that looked too expensive for Westridge, and he was watching Jamal like he'd just found something rare. "You changed the tempo," the man continued, stepping inside. "Most students play it straight. You made it yours." Jamal didn't answer. He didn't know how to answer. The man smiled. "My name is Marcus DeLeon." Jamal's breath caught. He knew that name. Everyone did. Marcus DeLeon wasn't just a pianist. He was a legend. A child prodigy who'd played Carnegie Hall at 16. A composer who'd won Grammys. A musician so famous even people who didn't care about classical music knew his name. And he was standing in a Westridge practice room, looking at Jamal. "I saw the video," Marcus said. Jamal's stomach dropped. Of course he'd seen it. The whole world had seen it. Marcus tilted his head. "How long have you been playing?" Jamal swallowed. "I don't." A pause. Marcus's eyebrows lifted. Explain. So Jamal did. He told him about the office lobby piano when he was 6. About how he'd never taken a lesson, never practiced scales, never even tried to learn. He just played. When he finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he said the one word Jamal had been afraid of his whole life. Savant. Jamal flinched. He'd heard that term before. In movies, in articles. Always whispered like it was something strange, something other. Marcus seemed to read his mind. It's not a bad thing, he said gently. It just means your brain works differently. Means you hear music in a way most people never will. He nodded to the piano. Play something else. Jamal hesitated. Then his hands moved. This time, Marcus listened. Really listened. And when Jamal finished, he said the last thing Jamal expected. I want to teach you. The next morning, Jamal walked into school and immediately knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the whispers. Those had been there yesterday. It was the cameras. A local news van was parked near the entrance. A reporter talking into a microphone while a cameraman filmed the school's facade. Students clustered in tight groups, heads bent together, phones out. Every few seconds, someone would glance his way, then quickly look back down. Jamal kept his head down and moved faster. He didn't make it far. Jamal Carter. The voice was loud, too cheerful, the kind of tone adults used when they were pretending to be friendly. Jamal turned just enough to see the reporter hurrying toward him, microphone in hand. Can you tell us what it feels like to go viral overnight? She asked, shoving the mic toward his face. Did you expect your performance to blow up like this? Jamal blinked. Were you trying to prove something to your principal? No, I just. Sources say you've never had a formal lesson. Is that true? The questions came too fast. The camera's red light blinked, recording every flinch, every hesitation. Jamal's throat tightened. He didn't know how to answer. Didn't know what they wanted him to say. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. Jamal has no comment. Principal Higgins' voice was smooth, practiced. He stepped between Jamal and the reporter, his grip just a little too tight. This is a school, not a press conference. If you'd like to schedule an interview, you'll need to go through the district's PR office. The reporter opened her mouth, but Higgins was already steering Jamal away, his smile never slipping even as his fingers dug into Jamal's shoulder. The second they were inside, Higgins dropped the act. My office. Now. The damage control. Higgins' office smelled like coffee and stale cologne. He didn't sit, just paced behind his desk, running a hand through his hair like he was trying not to pull it out. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jamal stayed silent. This was supposed to be over, Higgins hissed. One stupid performance, a few laughs, and everyone moves on. But no. Now the whole goddamn internet's talking about it. Now I've got news vans on my lawn and the school board breathing down my neck. Jamal stared at the floor. He wanted to say it wasn't his fault. Wanted to point out that Higgins was the one who'd called him up in the first place. But the words stuck in his throat. Higgins exhaled sharply. From now on, you don't talk to reporters. You don't talk to anyone about this. And you especially don't go near a piano where someone can film you again. Understood. Jamal nodded. Higgins' phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then went very still. Jamal didn't need to see the screen to know what it was. Another notification. Another headline. Another 1,000 people sharing the video. The lesson. Marcus DeLeon wasn't like any teacher Jamal had ever met. For one, he didn't care about rules. He'd shown up at Westridge unannounced, talked his way past the front office with nothing but his name, and commandeered the best practice room like he owned it. For another, he didn't treat Jamal like he was fragile. You're sloppy, Marcus said bluntly, leaning against the piano as Jamal played. You rely too much on instinct. That'll only take you so far. Jamal's fingers faltered. No one had ever called his playing sloppy before. Marcus smirked. Good. That got your attention. He nudged Jamal over and sat beside him on the bench. You've got talent, kid. Real talent. But talent without discipline is just noise. He placed his hands on the keys and played the same piece Jamal had just butchered, except where Jamal had rushed. Marcus was precise. Every note clean, every phrase intentional. It sounded better. Jamal hated that it sounded better. Marcus caught his expression and laughed. Yeah, that stings, doesn't it? Get used to it. He stood, stretching. Tomorrow, we work on scales. Scales. Jamal made a face. I don't need. You do, Marcus cut in. Because right now, you're a party trick. A kid who plays by ear. If you want to be more than that, you've got to put in the work. Jamal opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because Marcus was right. The rival. Lucas Whitaker had been Westridge's star pianist for 3 years. He'd won competitions, played at charity galas, even performed with the city's youth symphony. Music was his thing, or it had been, until Jamal. Now, every conversation in the halls was about Jamal. Every news segment, every social media post, even the teachers were whispering about him. And Lucas, he was done being overlooked. He waited until Jamal was alone in the practice room, then leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. Must be nice, Lucas said, getting famous for one lucky performance. Jamal's hands stilled. He didn't turn around. I've been playing since I was 4, Lucas continued, stepping inside. Lessons every week. Practice every day. But you show up, play once, and suddenly you're some kind of prodigy. Jamal stayed silent. Lucas smirked. The spring showcase is next month. You should enter. Unless you're scared people will realize you're a fraud. He left before Jamal could respond. Not that Jamal had anything to say. Because Lucas was right about one thing. He was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of proving everyone wrong. Scared that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as good as everyone thought. The flyers appeared overnight. Taped to lockers, plastered on bulletin boards, even slipped under classroom doors. Bright red paper with bold black letters announcing the Westridge Spring Showcase. At the bottom, in smaller print, featuring a special piano competition between Lucas Whitaker and Jamal Carter. Jamal stared at one of the flyers, his stomach twisting. He hadn't agreed to this. No one had even asked him. But there it was. His name. In print. For the whole school to see. A hand clapped him on the back. Too hard to be friendly. Guess you can't back out now, Lucas said, grinning as he walked past. Jamal didn't respond. He just kept staring at the flyer, the words blurring together. He should have known this would happen. Marcus's reaction. You're what? Marcus's voice echoed through the practice room, loud enough that Jamal winced. The older man was pacing, his usual calm replaced with something sharper. I didn't sign up for it, Jamal muttered. Someone just put my name on there. Marcus stopped pacing. Higgins. Jamal didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. Marcus exhaled through his nose, like he was counting to 10 in his head. All right, fine. We'll use this. Jamal blinked. What? You wanted to prove yourself? Now's your chance. Marcus sat at the piano beside him. But we're doing this right. No shortcuts. No relying on instinct. You're going to learn discipline if it kills you. Jamal swallowed. What if I'm not ready? Marcus gave him a long look. Then, without a word, he placed his hands on the keys and played. It wasn't a song Jamal recognized. It was messy, uneven, deliberately so. Notes clashed where they shouldn't. The rhythm stuttered. It sounded like a beginner's first attempt. Then Marcus stopped and turned to Jamal. That's what you'll sound like if you let fear win. Jamal's throat tightened. Marcus stood. Your call, kid. You want to back out? Do it now. But if you're going to play, play to win. The practice. Jamal had never worked this hard in his life. 2 hours before school. 3 hours after. Scales, arpeggios, finger exercises until his hands ached. Marcus didn't let him skip a single step. Didn't let him fall back on the natural talent that had always carried him before. Again, Marcus would say, when Jamal messed up a passage. Again, when his tempo wavered. Again, when his frustration boiled over and he slammed his hands down on the keys. It was exhausting. It was infuriating. And worst of all, it was working. Slowly, Jamal began to notice the difference. His fingers moved with more control. His phrasing became intentional. The music didn't just sound right, it felt right. But it wasn't enough. Not yet, because Lucas had been doing this for years. The sabotage. Higgins wasn't stupid. He knew Jamal was practicing, knew Marcus was training him, and he knew that if Jamal showed up at that showcase and played even half as well as he had in the auditorium, there'd be no stopping the fallout. So he made a call. The day before the showcase, Jamal arrived at school to find the practice room locked. Not just locked, asterisk changed. Asterisk the keypad on the door had been reset, the code no longer worked. When he went to the office to ask about it, the secretary just shrugged. Principal's orders. Maintenance issue. Jamal stared at her. But I have. Sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Across the hall, Lucas leaned against his locker, smirking. The solution. Marcus wasn't surprised. Figured he'd pull something like this, he muttered, scrolling through his phone. A few taps later, he nodded. Got it. We'll use the studio. Jamal blinked. What studio? Marcus grinned. Mine. An hour later, Jamal sat in front of a piano worth more than his mother's car, in a soundproof studio with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus tossed him a bottle of water. Now, let's get to work. The night before, Jamal lay in bed that night, hands restless at his sides. Tomorrow was the showcase. Tomorrow, he'd play in front of the whole school, in front of Higgins, with Lucas waiting for him to fail. His phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, the kid who'd filmed the first video. Asterisk, dude, you're trending again. Asterisk. Attached was a link. Jamal clicked it. A new post had gone viral. A side-by-side video. On the left, Jamal's original performance. On the right, Lucas playing the same piece at last year's showcase. The caption, asterisk, who's the real Prodigy? Asterisk. The comments were split. Some called Jamal a one-hit wonder. Others argued Lucas was overrated. A few even accused Jamal of faking his talent. Jamal turned off his phone. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. The day of the showcase arrived with a tension so thick Jamal could barely breathe. The school buzzed with anticipation. Students whispering in the halls, teachers casting sideways glances at him, even the janitors pausing their work to watch as he passed. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had picked a side. Jamal kept his head down and walked faster. The auditorium was already half full when he arrived, hours before the event. Crew members scurried across the stage, adjusting microphones and testing lights. In the center stood two grand pianos, polished to a mirror shine, positioned facing each other like duelists. And beside one of them, Lucas. He was warming up, fingers flying effortlessly through a complex piece Jamal recognized as Rachmaninoff. Showy. Technical. The kind of music meant to remind everyone just how much training he'd had. Lucas glanced up as Jamal approached, his smirk sharp. Ready to lose? Jamal didn't answer. He just walked to the other piano and sat. The keys were cool under his fingers. Familiar. He played a single scale, testing the weight of the action, the responsiveness. It was a good instrument, better than the battered upright he'd practiced on. But it wasn't his. Across from him, Lucas snorted. That's all you've got? A scale? Jamal ignored him. He closed his eyes and played the first few bars of the piece Marcus had drilled into him for weeks. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to impress. It was just true. For a second, the noise around him faded. The chatter, the laughter, the scrape of chairs, all of it disappeared, leaving only the music. Then a hand clapped down on his shoulder, shattering the moment. Save it for the show, Higgins said, his voice low. Wouldn't want you burning out early. His grip was too tight, his smile too sharp. Jamal pulled away. Higgins leaned in. By the way, change of plans. You're going last. Jamal froze. Going last meant following Lucas. Following Lucas meant competing directly, note for note, in front of everyone. It was a setup. Higgins knew it. Lucas knew it. And now so did Jamal. The crowd. By the time the showcase began, the auditorium was packed. Students filled the seats, phones out, whispering. Teachers lined the back wall. Even the superintendent had shown up, sitting front and center beside Higgins, who looked smugger than ever. Jamal waited backstage, his stomach in knots. He could hear the performances before him. A choir, a jazz band, a few soloists. Polite applause followed each one. Then the announcer's voice rang out. Next up, last year's regional champion, Lucas Whitaker. The applause was louder this time. A few cheers. Lucas strode onto the stage, bowed dramatically, and took his seat at the piano. He didn't hesitate. He played. And it was good. Technically flawless. Emotionally calculated. Every note precise, every run crisp. The kind of performance designed to remind everyone why he'd been the star for so long. When he finished, the audience erupted. Standing ovation. Whistles. Lucas bowed again, grinning, and shot a look toward the wings. Right at Jamal. Top that. The moment. The announcer called Jamal's name. The applause this time was different. Quieter. Curious. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd as he walked to the piano. He sat, took a breath, and realized he had no idea what to play. The piece he'd practiced was gone, vanished. His mind was blank, his fingers frozen. All he could hear was Lucas's performance echoing in his head, perfect and untouchable. A cough from the audience. A whisper. Higgins, leaning forward, smile widening. Then, a single note. Jamal didn't remember pressing it. But there it was. Quiet. Barely there. Another followed. Then another. Not the piece he'd practiced. Not anything he'd ever played before. Just music. His music. The whispers died. The room stilled. And Jamal played like no one was watching. The aftermath. No one cheered when he finished. Not at first. The silence stretched, heavy and thick, until a single person stood. Marcus. Slowly, others followed. The superintendent, teachers, students, even a few who'd been Lucas's fans. The applause built, louder than anything Lucas had gotten, louder than anything Jamal had ever heard. Across the stage, Lucas's face darkened, and in the front row, Higgins looked like he'd seen a ghost. The applause didn't stop. It rolled over Jamal in waves, the sound so loud it vibrated in his chest. He kept his hands on the keys a moment longer, letting the last notes fade completely before finally lifting his fingers. The standing ovation didn't waver. Marcus was clapping the hardest, his expression fierce with pride. The superintendent, a stern woman Jamal had only ever seen in photos, wiped at her eyes discreetly. Even some of Lucas's usual crowd were on their feet, though their cheers were more hesitant. But Jamal only had eyes for one person. Principal Higgins hadn't stood. He sat rigid in his seat, his face a mask of forced neutrality, but his fingers were clenched so tightly around the program that his knuckles had turned white. Jamal stood, gave a small bow, and walked off stage. His legs felt unsteady, his heartbeat still erratic from the rush of performing. Backstage, a few crew members nodded at him with something like respect. Someone handed him a bottle of water. And then, that was not what we rehearsed. Marcus's voice was low, meant only for him. Jamal turned to face him, bracing for criticism. Instead, Marcus grinned. It was better. Jamal exhaled, relief flooding through him. The moment didn't last. By the time Jamal made it out of the auditorium, the hallway was packed. Students swarmed him, some clapping him on the back, others shoving phones in his face to record his reaction. Jamal, how'd you learn to play like that? Did you mean to show up Lucas like that? Are you and Lucas gonna fight now? Jamal didn't answer. He just kept moving, weaving through the crowd until he found an empty hallway. He leaned against the lockers, finally alone. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. *, I saw the video. I'm so proud of you. We'll talk tonight. *. Jamal's throat tightened. He hadn't even known someone was recording. Then another buzz. A notification. *, At Westridge Updates. Breaking. Jamal Carter's performance at the Spring Showcase has gone viral again, this time with 2M views in under an hour. Jamal stared at the screen. This wasn't just school drama anymore. This was big. Higgins damage control. Principal Higgins' office door was locked. Inside, his voice was sharp, strained, like he was barely keeping his temper in check. I don't care how it happened. I care how it looks. A pause. No, we are not issuing a statement. Not yet. Outside, Jamal hesitated. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop. He'd just been walking past when he heard his own name. Higgins' next words were quieter, but no less venomous. The board is already asking questions. If they find out. A chair scraped. Footsteps. Jamal ducked into a nearby classroom just as Higgins' door yanked open. Through the narrow window, he watched Higgins storm down the hall, phone still pressed to his ear. Jamal exhaled. What had he just heard? Lucas's next move. Lucas cornered Jamal near the gym. No audience this time. No smirking crowd. Just the two of them in the dim hallway, the distant sounds of the showcase's after-party echoing from the cafeteria. For a long moment, Lucas just stared at him. Then, "You humiliated me." Jamal blinked. "I wasn't trying to." "Doesn't matter." Lucas's voice was low, shaking with something raw. "You think this is fair? I've worked for this my whole life. And you just, show up asterisk." Jamal didn't know what to say. Lucas stepped closer. "You're not even trained. You don't deserve this." The words hung between them. Then Lucas did something Jamal never expected. He laughed. "But you know what? It doesn't matter." He turned to leave, throwing one last sentence over his shoulder. "Because people like you don't last." The offer. Marcus found Jamal on the school steps later that night. "You've got a decision to make." Jamal looked up. "What?" Marcus sat beside him, his expression unreadable. "I got a call. Juilliard saw the video." Jamal's breath caught. "They want to audition you." The words didn't feel real. Juilliard wasn't just a school. It was the school. The kind of place kids like Lucas spent years preparing to apply to. Marcus continued. "But that's not all. There's a donor. Someone who was at the showcase tonight. They're offering to fund your tuition. All of it." Jamal's head spun. "Why?" Marcus smiled. "Because talent like yours? It's rare." He stood, brushing off his pants. "Think about it. But not too long." He walked away, leaving Jamal staring at the stars. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Jamal walked into school and knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the stares. Those had become normal. It was the silence. The way conversations cut off as he passed. The way teachers avoided his eyes. Something had happened. Something big. He found Ethan by the lockers, hunched over his phone. When Jamal approached, Ethan startled, then shoved the phone toward him without a word. The screen showed a news article. Westridge Prep under fire. Principal accused of targeting black student in viral piano incident. Jamal's stomach dropped. The article quoted unnamed sources, students, teachers, claiming Higgins had a history of singling out Jamal. That the piano prank wasn't the first time. That the locked practice room was deliberate. Worst of all, it mentioned the scholarship. Higgins had apparently fought against Jamal receiving it last year. Jamal looked up. Who talked to them? Ethan swallowed. A lot of people. After last night, he trailed off. The bell rang. Neither of them moved. Higgins' downfall. Higgins was gone by lunch. Not just from his office, from the school. The superintendent made the announcement herself. Higgins was on administrative leave, pending an investigation. The halls erupted. Some kids cheered. Others looked nervous, like they weren't sure what this meant. A few, the ones who'd laughed the hardest when Higgins called Jamal up, suddenly found very interesting things to look at on the floor. Jamal didn't feel vindicated. He just felt tired. Lucas's move. Lucas intercepted him near the music wing. No smirk this time. No audience. Just Lucas, his shoulders hunched, his usual confidence gone. "I didn't know," he blurted. Jamal stopped. "About what?" "Any of it." Lucas's voice was raw. "The scholarship. The targeting. I thought you were just some kid who got lucky." Jamal studied him. Lucas looked genuinely shaken. "It doesn't matter," Jamal said finally. "It does." Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "My dad's on the school board." He knew. And he never said anything. The pieces clicked. Lucas wasn't here to gloat. He was here because his world had just cracked open too. The audition. Marcus picked Jamal up after school in a car that smelled like coffee and old sheet music. "You ready?" Jamal wasn't, but he nodded anyway. The Juilliard audition room was smaller than he expected. Just a piano, a chair, and 3 judges with very sharp pencils. No crowd. No cameras. Just him and the music. The first judge spoke. "Play something you love." Jamal sat, breathed, and began. The piece ended, and the room held its breath. Jamal kept his hands on the keys a moment longer, letting the last note fade completely. His heart pounded so hard he was sure the judges could hear it. He didn't dare look up. A pen tapped against paper. One of the judges, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "That wasn't on your audition list." Jamal swallowed. "No." "Whose composition was it?" His fingers twitched. "Mine." A beat of silence. The judges exchanged glances. The man on the right scribbled something down. The woman's expression didn't change. "Play your prepared piece now," she said. Jamal's stomach dropped. He'd just improvised for them. He'd played something real. And they wanted scales? But Marcus's warning echoed in his head. "They'll test your discipline, not just your talent." So he played the Bach prelude he'd practiced. Perfectly. Technically flawless. When he finished, the judges thanked him. No smiles. No hints. Just a polite, "We'll be in touch." The dismissal stung more than he expected. The wait. Marcus took one look at Jamal's face when he came out and didn't ask. They got burgers instead. Greasy, salty. The kind of food Jamal's mom never let him eat. Marcus didn't mention the audition once. Just talked about his own disastrous first try at Juilliard. How he'd shown up late. How he'd played a Chopin etude with 2 wrong notes. How he'd been certain his career was over before it began. "Heard back in 3 days, Marcus said, wiping ketchup off his chin. "Rejection letter." Jamal blinked. "What?" "Got in the next year." Marcus shrugged. "Sometimes the no's are just not yet." Jamal poked at his fries. He wasn't sure if that helped. His phone buzzed. "Ethan." "Check the news." The leak. Someone had hacked the school board's emails. Every shady decision, every cut corner, every racist joke Higgins had ever put in writing. It was all public now. Including the emails about Jamal. Asterisk. Do we really need another scholarship kid causing trouble? Asterisk. Asterisk. His mother keeps complaining about the environment. Maybe he'd be happier elsewhere. Asterisk. And the worst one. Asterisk. Let's see how long he lasts after a little reality check. Asterisk. Sent the day before the piano incident. Jamal's hands shook. He'd known Higgins didn't like him. But seeing it spelled out like that, Marcus snatched the phone away. "Don't." "But." "Those emails aren't for you," Marcus said firmly. "They're for the people who allowed it. Let them deal with the fallout." Jamal wanted to argue, but the exhaustion hit him like a wave. He was so tired of fighting. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The message was short. "Check your email." The decision. The Juilliard email arrived at 9:17 p.m. Jamal stared at the subject line. Audition results. His finger hovered. His mom knocked on his door. "You've got a visitor." Marcus stood in their tiny living room, holding 2 cups of cheap gas station coffee. He took one look at Jamal's face and said, "You haven't opened it." Jamal shook his head. Marcus set the coffees down. "Want me to?" Jamal handed him the phone. Marcus read the email. His expression didn't change. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Pack your bags, kid." The acceptance letter from Juilliard sat on the kitchen table, the official seal gleaming under the fluorescent light. Jamal's mother had cried when he told her. Then she'd immediately started worrying about how they'd afford New York, how he'd adjust, whether he'd be safe so far from home. Jamal had nodded along, but his mind was elsewhere. On the email still circulating online, on the way Lucas had looked at him yesterday, on the hollow feeling in his chest that even good news couldn't shake. The knock at the door came just past 7. Jamal's mother frowned. "You expecting someone?" He wasn't. But when he opened the door, Lucas stood on the porch, his usual cocky demeanor replaced with something tense and uncertain. He held a manila envelope in one hand, his knuckles white around the edges. "I need to show you something," he said. Jamal's mother hovered in the doorway, her arms crossed. Lucas didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on Jamal. "5 minutes," Jamal said, stepping outside. The night air was cool, the street quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Lucas didn't waste time. He shoved the envelope at Jamal. "Open it." Inside were printed emails, more than Jamal had seen online. These weren't just from Higgins. They were from Lucas's father, board member Daniel Whitaker. Jamal skimmed the first one, then the next, his stomach twisting. Asterisk, the Carter kid's scholarship is a liability. If he can't keep up, that's on us. Asterisk. Asterisk, Higgins has a plan to put him in his place. Let's not interfere. Asterisk. Asterisk, Lucas deserves that spotlight. Don't let some charity case steal it. Asterisk. Jamal looked up. "Why are you showing me this?" Lucas's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't know." The raw honesty in his voice caught Jamal off guard. "I thought you were just some nobody who got lucky," Lucas continued. "I didn't know they were doing this." He gestured at the emails. "My dad's resigning from the board tomorrow." "But that's not enough." Jamal waited. Lucas took a deep breath. "There's a national competition next month. Big prize money. Big exposure." He met Jamal's eyes. "I'm dropping out. You should take my spot." Jamal stared at him. This was the last thing he'd expected. Lucas Whitaker, giving up a chance to win? Why? Jamal asked. Lucas's smile was bitter. "Because you're better. And for once, I'm not too proud to admit it." The fallout. Higgins' resignation made the news. So did the board's overhaul. But the story that really blew up was the video of Jamal's showcase performance. The one where the camera panned to Higgins' face as the standing ovation began. The look of sheer disbelief. The slow dawning realization that his plan had backfired spectacularly. The internet had a field day. Memes. Reaction videos. Even a few celebrities weighing in. Jamal tried to ignore it. He had bigger things to focus on. Like the competition Lucas had handed him. The practice. Marcus was relentless. Now that Juilliard was on the table, the stakes were higher. Every missed note, every sloppy transition, every moment of hesitation. Marcus called it out. Again, he'd snap when Jamal messed up a run. Again, when his dynamics were uneven. Asterisk again asterisk, when his frustration boiled over and he nearly walked out. It was brutal. It was necessary. Because this competition wasn't just about talent. It was about precision. About proving he belonged on that stage. And Jamal was determined to prove it. The visitor. The man at the door wore a suit that cost more than Jamal's entire wardrobe. Jamal Carter? Jamal nodded, wary. The man smiled. "I'm Robert Vance. I run the Vance Foundation." He held out a card. "We fund young artists like you." Jamal took the card, confused. "I already have a scholarship." "Not for Juilliard." Vance's smile widened. "For life. Housing. Mentorship. Even a stipend." Jamal's mother appeared behind him, her eyes narrowing. "What's the catch?" Vance chuckled. "No catch. Just an investment in greatness." He nodded at Jamal. "You've got something special. We want to help you share it." The offer hung in the air, too big to process. Jamal looked at his mother. Her expression was unreadable. The decision. The competition application deadline was tomorrow. The Vance Foundation needed an answer by Friday. Juilliard started in 3 months. Jamal sat at the piano in Marcus's studio, his hands resting on the keys. For once, he didn't play. He just sat there thinking. Marcus leaned against the piano, watching him. "You're overcomplicating it." Jamal frowned. "How? You think this is about choosing the right path?" Marcus shook his head. "It's about choosing your path." Jamal looked down at the keys. His fingers found the first note, and for the first time in weeks, he played without thinking. The morning of the competition arrived with a heavy summer rain that pattered against the windows of the hotel room. Jamal sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his reflection in the mirror across from him. He wore a suit Marcus had helped him pick out. Dark blue, tailored just enough to look professional without being stiff. His fingers tapped an uneven rhythm against his knees, the nerves coiling tighter with each passing minute. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with competitors and their coaches. The air smelled like coffee and expensive perfume. Jamal spotted Marcus near the registration table, talking to a judge. The man's expression was serious, his hands moving in sharp gestures as he spoke. Whatever he was saying, it didn't look like small talk. A hand touched Jamal's shoulder. He turned. Lucas stood there, dressed in a crisp black suit, his usual smirk absent. "You ready?" Jamal blinked. "What are you doing here?" Lucas shrugged. "I told you. I dropped out. But I still wanted to watch." He hesitated, then added, "Someone's got to make sure you don't choke." The jab lacked its usual bite. Jamal almost smiled. Then the announcer called his name. The stage. The concert hall was bigger than Jamal had imagined. The lights were brighter, the silence deeper. The audience blurred into a sea of shadows beyond the stage, but he could feel their eyes on him. The judges sat at a long table in the front row, their pens poised over score sheets. One of them, a woman with silver hair, nodded at him. "Whenever you're ready," she said. Jamal sat at the piano. The keys were cool beneath his fingers. He took a breath and played. The mistake. It happened halfway through the third movement. A wrong note. Not just any wrong note, a glaring, obvious, amateur mistake. The kind that made the judges' pens pause. The kind that made the audience shift in their seats. Jamal's fingers faltered. For one terrifying second, his mind went blank. Then he kept playing. Not the piece as written. Not the safe, rehearsed version. He adapted. He turned the mistake into something new. A variation. An improvisation. Something that shouldn't have worked, but did. When he finished, the applause was polite but hesitant. The judges' faces were unreadable. Jamal stood, bowed, and walked off stage, his heart pounding. The aftermath. Marcus met him backstage. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus sighed. "Well, that was interesting." Jamal winced. "I messed up." "No." Marcus shook his head. "You recovered." "That's harder." Across the room, the silver-haired judge was whispering to her colleagues. One of them glanced at Jamal, then quickly looked away. Lucas appeared in the doorway. "They're announcing the results in 10 minutes. Jamal nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The results. Third place went to a girl from California. Second place went to a boy from Chicago. First place, Jamal Carter. The applause was louder this time. The judges' smiles were genuine. The silver-haired woman even shook his hand. "Most competitors would have panicked after a mistake like that," she said. "You turned it into art." Jamal didn't know what to say, so he just said, "Thank you." The offer. Robert Vance was waiting for him outside. "Congratulations," he said, clapping Jamal on the shoulder. "I knew you had it in you." Up close, Vance's smile was too wide, his grip too tight. Marcus stepped between them. "He's got a lot to process right now." Vance's smile didn't waver. "Of course. But don't forget, our offer still stands." He handed Jamal another card. "Call me when you're ready." As soon as Vance was gone, Marcus turned to Jamal. "Be careful with that guy." Jamal frowned. "Why?" Marcus hesitated. Then he sighed. Because people like him don't invest in talent. They invest in control. The reunion. The hotel restaurant was quiet, the post-competition crowd thinning out. Jamal picked at his dessert, his mind still replaying the performance. Then a voice said, "Mind if I join you?" Principal Higgins stood at the edge of the table. He looked different out of his suit. Smaller, somehow. Older. Jamal tensed. Higgins sat anyway. "I heard about your win. Congratulations." The words sounded genuine. That was the strangest part. Jamal set his fork down. "What do you want?" Higgins sighed. "To apologize." The silence stretched. Then Higgins pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. "Resignation letter," he said. "Effective immediately. The board's voting on my replacement next week." He met Jamal's eyes. "It's someone you'll like." Jamal didn't touch the envelope. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserved better." Higgins stood. "And because I hope you'll believe me when I say I'm sorry." He walked away before Jamal could respond. The truth. Marcus found Jamal on the hotel roof later that night. The city lights stretched out below them, glittering and endless. "You okay?" Marcus asked. Jamal shook his head. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Marcus leaned against the railing. "About Higgins?" "About everything." Jamal turned to him. "Did you know? About the emails? About Vance? About some of it." Marcus didn't flinch. "Not all." Jamal waited. Marcus sighed. "I knew Higgins was a problem. I didn't know how bad it was until the emails leaked." He looked at Jamal. "And Vance? He's got a reputation. He collects talented kids. Uses them for clout." Jamal's stomach twisted. "So his offer is about him, not you." Marcus shook his head. "You don't need him, Jamal. You never did." The words settled between them, heavy and true. The choice. The acceptance letter from Juilliard was still in Jamal's bag. The Vance Foundation's card was in his pocket. The competition trophy sat on the nightstand. Jamal lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "You coming back to school next week?" Jamal smiled. Then he typed his reply. The first day back at Westridge Prep felt like stepping into a different school. The halls were quieter, the students more subdued. Even the teachers seemed uncertain, their eyes darting toward the principal's office as they passed. Jamal kept his head down, ignoring the whispers that still followed him. He wasn't the same kid who had left for that competition. He wasn't sure what he was now. The door to the principal's office stood open. Inside, a woman with dark skin and graying braids sat behind Higgins' old desk, sorting through files. She looked up as Jamal paused in the doorway. "You must be Jamal," she said, her voice warm but firm. "I'm Principal Mbeki. Come in." Jamal hesitated, then stepped inside. The office smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh paint. The walls, once lined with Higgins awards and diplomas, were bare except for a single framed photo. A younger Principal Mbeki standing beside a group of students at a piano competition. "I heard about your win," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "Impressive." Jamal sat stiffly. "Thank you." Principal Mbeki studied him for a moment, then leaned forward. "I won't pretend to understand what you've been through here, but I can promise you this. No more games. No more targeting. If anyone gives you trouble, you come straight to me." Jamal nodded, unsure what to say. She smiled slightly. "And I hear you'll need access to the practice rooms after hours. Consider it done." The new normal. Lucas fell into step beside Jamal on the way to lunch. "Did you hear?" he said, keeping his voice low. "They're dissolving the scholarship committee. My dad's pissed." Jamal glanced at him. "Are you?" Lucas shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe it's for the best." The cafeteria buzzed with conversation, but a hush fell over their usual table as Jamal approached. Ethan scooted over to make room, his eyes wide. "Dude," he whispered, "you're like famous now." Jamal shook his head, but it was true. The competition footage had gone viral. especially the part where he'd turned his mistake into something new. Comments flooded in from musicians, teachers, even a few celebrities. But the message that stuck with him was from an unknown number. "You play like my son used to." The visitor. Marcus was waiting outside the school gates at dismissal, his car idling at the curb. He didn't usually pick Jamal up. "Get in," he said when Jamal approached. "There's someone you need to meet." The drive was silent. Marcus' knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his usual calm replaced with something tense. They pulled up to a small house on the outskirts of town. The porch light was on, illuminating a figure in a rocking chair, an older black man with weathered hands and sharp eyes. Marcus took a deep breath. "That's Elijah De Leon, my father." Jamal froze. Marcus had never mentioned family. The old man stood as they approached, his gaze fixed on Jamal. "So you're the boy everyone's talking about." Up close, his eyes were the same as Marcus, deep brown, piercing. But where Marcus' gaze was warm, Elijah's was assessing, calculating. "He's better than you were at his age," Elijah said to Marcus, then turned back to Jamal. "Play for me." It wasn't a request. The lesson. The piano in Elijah's living room was ancient, the wood scarred, the keys yellowed with age. But the sound was rich and full, vibrating through Jamal's bones as he played. Elijah listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Jamal finished, the old man nodded once. "You've got the gift," he said, "but you're holding back." Jamal frowned. "What do you mean?" Elijah stood slowly, his joints creaking. He placed his hands on the keys, gnarled fingers hovering just above the ivory. Then he played. It wasn't the flawless technique Marcus had. It wasn't the raw talent Jamal possessed. It was something deeper, something that ached. The song ended too soon. "That," Elijah said quietly, "is what happens when you stop being afraid of the pain." Marcus looked away. Jamal understood. This wasn't just a lesson about music. The revelation. Dinner was awkward. Elijah barely spoke, Marcus barely ate, and Jamal barely breathed. Then Elijah set his fork down with a clatter. "You're sending him to Juilliard," he said to Marcus. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. Elijah grunted. "Good. But he needs to know the truth first." Marcus stiffened. "Dad, the truth about what?" Jamal asked. Elijah ignored Marcus' warning look. "About why my son really came back to this town. About why he sought you out." The air left the room. Marcus closed his eyes. And Elijah told the story. The past. 20 years ago, Marcus De Leon had been the rising star of classical music, the youngest pianist ever accepted to Juilliard, the heir to his father's legacy. Then, at the height of his career, he'd walked away. Stage fright, the newspapers said. Creative differences, his manager claimed. The truth was simpler and more painful. "I couldn't take the pressure," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I cracked. In front of everyone." Elijah snorted. He made a mistake. One mistake. And he let it destroy him. Jamal looked between them. "But you're still amazing." Marcus smiled bitterly. "Now, maybe. After years of hiding. After wasting my father's name." Elijah pushed back from the table. "I didn't bring you here to wallow in self-pity, boy. I brought you here to show him what happens when you let fear win." He pointed at Jamal. "You think he doesn't feel it too? You think he's not terrified right now?" Jamal's breath caught. Because he was. Every day. Elijah nodded, satisfied. "Exactly. The difference is, he's still playing anyway." The silence stretched. Then Marcus did something Jamal had never seen before. He cried. The decision. The drive back was quiet. The city lights blurred past, streaks of gold against the black. Marcus cleared his throat. "I should have told you sooner." Jamal watched the road. "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't want you to see me as a failure." Jamal turned to him. "You're not." Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. "I walked away from everything. My career. My father. But you came back," Jamal said. For me. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The letter. Jamal found it slipped under his door when he got home. A single sheet of paper, handwritten in shaky script. Boy who plays like my son. Asterisk, I heard your competition piece. You remind me of him. Not just the talent, the heart. He would have liked you. Asterisk. Asterisk, he died last winter. Overdose. The pressure got to him, same as it almost got to Marcus. Same as it'll try to get to you. Asterisk. Don't let it. Jamal read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. The acceptance packet from Juilliard arrived on a Tuesday. Jamal sat at the kitchen table, staring at the thick envelope with its embossed logo. His mother hovered behind him, her hands resting on his shoulders as he carefully slit it open with a butter knife. Inside were forms to fill out, orientation schedules, housing information, and at the bottom of the stack, a single sheet with bold letters at the top. Placement audition, required for all incoming freshmen. His mother squeezed his shoulders. Another audition? Jamal swallowed. First week of classes. To determine my level. He didn't mention what else the letter said, that even accepted students could be placed on probation if the faculty deemed them unprepared, that scholarships could be revoked, that the real test was still coming. The phone rang, shattering the moment. His mother answered, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she listened. When she hung up, her lips were pressed into a thin line. That was the hospital. Elijah De Leon was admitted this morning. The drive to the medical center was tense. Marcus sat rigid in the passenger seat, his usual calm replaced with a quiet, simmering panic. He hadn't said more than 3 words since the call came in. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. They found Elijah in a corner room, hooked to monitors that beeped in steady rhythm. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, his dark skin ashen against the white sheets. Marcus stopped in the doorway. Dad. Elijah opened his eyes. Took you long enough. His voice was weaker than Jamal remembered, but the sharpness remained. Stop looking at me like I'm already dead. It's just my damn heart acting up again. Marcus dragged a chair to the bedside. What did the doctors say? What they always say. Less stress. Better diet. Elijah waved a hand, the 4 lines swaying, as if music ever cared about cholesterol. His gaze shifted to Jamal. You. Come here. Jamal stepped forward. Elijah studied him for a long moment. You're still playing? Every day. Good. Elijah nodded toward the corner, where a small electronic keyboard sat on a rolling table. Then prove it. Marcus stiffened. Dad, this isn't. Quiet. Elijah's eyes never left Jamal's. Well, the keyboard was cheap, the keys stiff and unresponsive compared to what Jamal was used to. But he sat anyway, his fingers hovering over the plastic. He played the first piece that came to mind, the one Elijah had played for him that first night. Or tried to. The keyboard speakers distorted the notes, turning the haunting melody tinny and thin. When he finished, Elijah sighed. Garbage instrument. But you're getting better. He shifted painfully against the pillows. Now tell me, why Juilliard? Jamal hesitated. It's the best. Is it? Elijah coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Or is it just what everyone tells you is the best? Marcus stood abruptly. That's enough. You need rest. Elijah ignored him. There's a difference between being great and being happy, boy. I learned that too late. His gaze flicked to Marcus. My son learned it too late too. Jamal looked down at the cheap keyboard. What if I want both? Elijah smiled faintly. Then you're smarter than both of us. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the silence that followed. Later, as they walked to the parking lot, Marcus stopped suddenly, his hands clenched at his sides. He wasn't always like this. The bitterness. He exhaled sharply. The regret. Jamal waited. He was brilliant, Marcus said quietly. The most brilliant musician I've ever known. And he threw it all away for a woman who left him anyway. He met Jamal's eyes. Don't make his mistakes. Don't make mine. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken warnings. At home, Jamal found the old upright piano in the corner of his room, the one his mother had scrimped and saved for when his talent first appeared. He played until his fingers ached, until the questions in his head quieted to a dull roar. The next morning, a new email appeared in his inbox. The subject line made his stomach drop. Vance Foundation, final offer deadline approaching. He deleted it without opening it. The rain fell in steady sheets against the window of Jamal's bedroom, a rhythmic tapping that matched the restless movement of his fingers against the desk. The Vance Foundation email still lingered in his deleted folder, a ghost of a decision he wasn't ready to make. His mother had left for her night shift an hour ago, the smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. A knock at the front door startled him. No one visited this late. Jamal peered through the peephole to see Lucas standing on the porch, soaked from the rain, his usual polished appearance replaced with something raw and urgent. He held a thick envelope against his chest, trying in vain to protect it from the downpour. Jamal opened the door. "What are you?" "We need to talk," Lucas interrupted, pushing past him into the small living room. Water dripped from his clothes onto the carpet. "I found something. About Vance." He thrust the envelope at Jamal. Inside were printed bank statements, contracts, and, most damning, a series of emails between Vance and the Dean of Admissions at Eastman School of Music. Jamal scanned the first page, then looked up sharply. "He gets kickbacks?" "Worse." Lucas pointed to a highlighted section. "He owns part of a management company. Every scholarship kid signs a 10-year contract before they see a dime. It's indentured servitude with better PR." The dates jumped out at Jamal. 3 of the last 5 Vance prodigies had dropped out of music entirely within 2 years. 1 had been hospitalized for exhaustion. Lucas ran a hand through his wet hair. "My dad's law firm was vetting him as a potential donor. When I saw the files, He broke off, meeting Jamal's eyes. "I thought you should know." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly in the silence. Jamal stared at the papers. All those promises. All that support. A trap disguised as opportunity. "Why show me this?" he asked quietly. Lucas's jaw tightened. "Because I owe you." Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the roof like a warning. The hospital. Elijah's condition had worsened. Marcus sat vigil in the uncomfortable plastic chair, his father's hand clasped in his own. The machines beeped and whirred, a mechanical chorus underscoring the old man's labored breathing. Jamal hesitated in the doorway. Marcus didn't look up. "He asked for you." Elijah's eyes opened at the sound of their voices. The vibrant man who had commanded a piano with such authority now looked frail beneath the hospital sheets. "Come closer," he rasped. Jamal approached the bed. Elijah's grip, when it came, was surprisingly strong. "You practice every day." "Good." Elijah's gaze shifted to Marcus. "Play for us." Marcus stiffened. "Dad." "Not you." Elijah nodded toward the corner, where a small portable keyboard had been set up. "Him." Jamal sat at the instrument, its keys worn smooth from use. He played the piece Elijah had taught him, the one full of pain and regret. But this time, he added something new, a variation of his own, a thread of hope woven through the sorrow. When he finished, Elijah closed his eyes. "That's it. That's the sound I've been waiting for." Marcus made a small, broken noise in the back of his throat. Elijah's breathing grew steadier as he spoke. "Jamal, listen. Music isn't just notes. It's truth. The kind that burns going down." He reached out, grasping Marcus's arm. "My son forgot that. Don't you forget too." The heart monitor beeped a steady rhythm in the silence that followed. The decision. The Juilliard placement audition required 3 pieces. 1 Baroque, 1 classical, and 1 romantic. Jamal had been preparing them for weeks under Marcus's exacting guidance. But as he sat at the piano in the practice room the night before his flight to New York, none of them felt right. He played the first few bars of his Bach selection, then stopped. The notes were perfect, and utterly lifeless. Marcus frowned from his seat nearby. Again. Jamal didn't move. "What if I played something else?" "Not an option." "But..." Marcus stood abruptly. "You think this is about artistry? It's a test, Jamal. They want to see if you can follow directions. If you can be molded. The words hung between them. Jamal thought of Elijah's warning, of Vance's contracts, of the way Lucas had looked standing in his living room, drenched and determined. He turned back to the piano and began to play something entirely unexpected. The audition. The Juilliard audition room was smaller than Jamal had imagined. Just a grand piano, 3 judges, and a single window letting in the morning light. The lead examiner, a severe-looking woman with silver hair, adjusted her glasses. "You may begin when ready." Jamal took a deep breath and played Elijah's piece. Not the Bach, not the Mozart, not any of the approved selections. The judges exchanged glances. One man's pen hovered over his score sheet, unmoving. Jamal didn't stop. He played through the hesitation, through the raised eyebrows, through the moment when the silver-haired woman leaned forward with sudden intensity. When the last note faded, the room was utterly silent. Then the woman removed her glasses. "That wasn't on your repertoire list." "No," Jamal said. "Why?" He met her gaze. "Because this is the music that matters." For the first time, the hint of a smile touched her lips. "Interesting." The aftermath. Marcus was waiting outside, pacing the length of the hallway. When Jamal emerged, he stopped mid-stride. "Well," Jamal shrugged. "They listened." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "I should be furious with you. But Elijah would have loved that stunt." Marcus shook his head. "Come on. Let's get coffee." As they walked through the bustling streets of New York, Jamal's phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was brief. Asterisk heard your audition. That took guts. Coffee tomorrow. K. Peters, Dean of Admissions asterisk. Marcus read it over his shoulder and laughed. "Well, that's one way to make an impression." The sun broke through the clouds as they turned the corner, bathing the city in sudden, golden light. The coffee shop near Juilliard smelled of roasted beans and burnt sugar. Jamal sat across from Dean Catherine Peters, her sharp eyes studying him over the rim of her glasses as she stirred her espresso. She looked younger in person than her reputation suggested. Early 50s, maybe, with silver streaks running through her dark hair and laugh lines around her mouth that hinted at humor her professional demeanor concealed. "You realize," she said, setting her spoon down with a quiet clink, "that your little stunt should have disqualified you." Jamal's fingers tightened around his cup. "I know. And yet." She leaned back in her chair. "That piece you played, who wrote it?" "My teacher's father, Elijah De Leon." She nodded as if she'd expected the answer. "I thought I recognized the style. He was brilliant. Reckless, but brilliant." Her gaze sharpened. "Much like your performance yesterday." Outside, a cab honked loudly, the sound muffled through the glass. Jamal waited, the weight of her scrutiny pressing down on him. Dean Peters sighed. "Here's the thing, Jamal. Juilliard gets hundreds of technically perfect applicants every year. What we rarely get is someone who plays like they have something to say." She tapped her fingers against the table. "I'm offering you a spot in our artist diploma program. No core curriculum. No placement tests. Just you and the music." Jamal's breath caught. The artist diploma was Juilliard's most prestigious track, reserved for performers deemed ready for professional careers. Most students spent years trying to earn a place in it. Dean Peters smiled slightly at his expression. "Marcus doesn't know about this offer yet. I suspect he'll have opinions." As if summoned, Jamal's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Asterisk, "Where are you? We need to talk about yesterday." Asterisk. The argument. Marcus's reaction was worse than Jamal anticipated. "You're considering it?" He paced the length of their tiny hotel room. His usual composure shattered. "Do you have any idea what you'd be giving up? The connections? The foundation?" Jamal sat on the edge of the bed. "I thought you didn't care about that stuff." "I care about you not making the same mistakes I did." Marcus stopped abruptly, running a hand over his face. "The diploma program isolates you. It's all performance, no safety net. If you crash, then I crash." Jamal met his eyes. "But at least it'll be on my own terms." Marcus looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You sound like Elijah." The words hung between them, equal parts accusation and surrender. The call. The hospital phone rang at 3:17 a.m. Marcus answered on the first ring, his voice rough with sleep. Then it sharpened. "When?" "No, we're coming. Now." He was already pulling on his jacket when Jamal sat up. "What's wrong?" Marcus's hands shook as he zipped his bag. Elijah took a turn. "They don't think," he broke off, swallowing hard. "We need to go." The roads were empty at that hour, the streetlights casting long shadows as Marcus sped through intersections. Jamal clutched the door handle, watching the city blur past. He thought of Elijah's hands on the piano keys. The way the old man had looked at him after he played. "That's the sound I've been waiting for." The hospital corridors were too bright, too quiet. A nurse met them at the ICU doors, her expression carefully neutral. "Are you family?" Marcus's voice cracked. "I'm his son." Jamal waited outside as Marcus went in. The plastic chairs were hard and cold, the air thick with antiseptic. He pulled out his phone, scrolling absently through his emails, past the Juilliard acceptance, past the unanswered Vance Foundation reminders, until he found the recording he'd made of Elijah playing. He listened with one earbud in, the old man's music filling his head, drowning out the beeping machines beyond the doors. The revelation. Lucas's second envelope arrived at dawn. Jamal found it slipped under his hotel room door, thick with documents. He opened it with sleep-heavy hands, expecting more Vance revelations. What he found was worse. Page after page of Westridge Prep financial records, all pointing to one undeniable fact. Robert Vance had been funding Higgins's special projects for years. The piano in the auditorium? A Vance donation. The scholarship program Jamal had benefited from? A Vance tax write-off. And at the bottom, a single handwritten note from Lucas. "He's been watching you longer than you think." The choice. Elijah died at sunrise. Marcus emerged from the ICU looking decades older, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. He sat beside Jamal in the too-bright waiting room, their shoulders touching. "He asked about you," Marcus said finally. "Wanted to know if you decided about Juilliard yet." Jamal looked down at the envelope in his lap. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you'd figure it out." Marcus rubbed his face. Last thing he said was, "Make sure the boy knows. Music isn't the notes. It's the spaces between." A nurse wheeled a cart past, the wheels squeaking against the linoleum. Jamal thought of Vance's manipulations, of Higgins's cruelty, of Elijah's hands on the piano keys, creating beauty from pain. He reached into his bag and pulled out the Juilliard acceptance letter. Then he took a pen and began to write. The letter to Dean Peters was short, just 3 sentences, but Jamal rewrote it 7 times before he was satisfied. He sealed it in an envelope, his hand steady despite the pounding in his chest. Outside the hotel window, New York stretched endlessly, its skyline glittering under a pale morning sky. Marcus emerged from the bathroom, his face still damp from washing. He took one look at the envelope in Jamal's hand and froze. "You're turning it down." It wasn't a question. Jamal slid the envelope into his backpack. "I'm not saying no to Juilliard. Just to the path they wanted me to take." Marcus exhaled sharply and reached for his coat. "We should get breakfast." They found a diner around the corner, the kind of place with sticky vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the night before. Marcus waited until the waitress left with their order before speaking again. "Tell me you're not doing this because of Vance." Jamal stirred sugar into his coffee, watching the crystals dissolve. "It's not just Vance. It's..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't want to be molded into something I'm not. Not by Juilliard. Not by anyone." Marcus studied him across the table. "You realize you're giving up guaranteed prestige. Connections. A direct line to every orchestra and concert hall in the world." "I know. And you're okay with that?" Jamal looked up. "Are you?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Marcus had spent years running from his own failures, his father's shadow. Now here was Jamal, walking away from the very opportunities Marcus had once dreamed of. The waitress returned with their food, pancakes for Jamal, an omelet for Marcus. They ate in silence for a while, the clink of silverware against plates the only sound at their table. Finally, Marcus set his fork down. "What will you do instead?" Jamal wiped syrup from his mouth. "I was thinking about Elijah's old neighborhood. The community center there has a music program." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "You want to teach? Not just teach. Play. For people who don't usually get to hear live music." Jamal shrugged. "At least for a while." For the first time since Elijah's death, something like a smile touched Marcus's lips. He'd have hated that idea. "Yeah." Jamal grinned. "At first." The inheritance. Elijah's apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Sheet music piled on every surface, coffee cups fossilized with old stains, the ancient piano dominating the small living room. Marcus stood in the doorway, his shoulders tense as he took it all in. The lawyer, a tired-looking woman in a rumpled suit, handed Marcus a set of keys. "The deed is in your name now. The piano, the royalties, everything." She hesitated. "There's also this." She produced a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring, Elijah's wedding band. Marcus took it without a word, his fingers closing around it tightly. The lawyer left them alone with the ghosts. Jamal wandered to the piano, running a finger along its dusty lid. A photograph sat framed on top, a much younger Elijah, his arm around a smiling woman, both of them standing in front of Carnegie Hall. Marcus came up beside him. "My mother. She died when I was 8. He picked up the photo, his thumb brushing the glass. He never played professionally again after that. Jamal had never heard this part of the story. Why not? Grief, I guess. Or guilt. Marcus set the photo back down. He always said music should come from joy. After she was gone, he couldn't find it anymore. The weight of the confession settled between them. Jamal thought of his own mother, working double shifts to keep him in school. Of the way her face had lit up when he played for her. Marcus cleared his throat. "I want you to have it." Jamal blinked. "The piano?" "Yes." Marcus looked around the cluttered apartment. "All of it, really. The music, the legacy, whatever's left." "I can't." "You can." Marcus met his eyes. "He would have wanted you to." The return. Westridge Prep looked different in the summer. Quieter, emptier, the halls echoing with every footstep. Principal Becky's office door was open when Jamal arrived, the scent of jasmine tea drifting into the corridor. She looked up from her paperwork, her expression shifting from surprise to warmth. "Jamal, I heard about Juilliard." Word traveled fast. Jamal shifted his weight. "Actually, that's why I'm here." He laid out his idea quickly. A summer program for kids who couldn't afford lessons. Using the school's pianos. Maybe even expanding to other instruments if there was interest. Principal Becky listened without interrupting, her fingers steepled under her chin. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You realize Robert Vance still sits on our board?" Jamal nodded. "I do. And you're prepared to deal with that?" He thought of Elijah's ring on Marcus's finger, of the recording he'd made of the old man playing, of the way music had saved him when nothing else could. "Yes," he said. Principal Becky smiled. "Then welcome home, Mr. Carter." The first lesson. 10 kids showed up that first Monday. Some shy, some skeptical, all watching Jamal with varying degrees of curiosity as he sat at the piano in the school auditorium. The same one Higgins had tried to humiliate him on months before. "My name's Jamal," he said, his voice bouncing off the empty seats. "And I'm not here to teach you how to play." A few eyebrows went up. "I'm here to show you how to listen." He placed his hands on the keys. "To the music. To yourselves. To the spaces between the notes." Then he played, not a perfect sonata or a flashy etude, but the first piece Elijah had ever taught him. Full of mistakes. Full of life. By the time he finished, even the most skeptical kids were leaning forward in their seats. One girl, no older than 10 with braids that swung when she moved, raised her hand. "Can you show me how to do that?" Jamal smiled. "Let's start with where it hurts." The heat wave hit in late July, turning Westridge Prep's classrooms into ovens. Jamal propped open the auditorium doors to let in what little breeze there was, the ancient air conditioning unit groaning in protest as it struggled against the humidity. 10 kids had become 20, then 30. Word had spread about the free lessons, about the young teacher who didn't care if you couldn't read music as long as you could feel it. Jamal arrived early each morning to push aside chairs and set up borrowed music stands, the routine giving shape to his days. Today, though, something was off. The first sign was the locked storage closet, the one where the school kept spare sheet music and practice books. Jamal jiggled the handle again, frowning. It had been open yesterday. Looking for these? Principal Becky stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. Behind her, 2 custodians wheeled a cart stacked with boxes, all the materials Jamal had been using for his lessons. "What's going on?" Jamal asked, though the tightness in her expression already told him. "Board meeting last night." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Vance pushed through a new policy. All non-essential programs must pay for their own supplies. She nodded to the cart. "I'm sorry, Jamal. My hands are tied." The implications hit him like a physical blow. No music, no books, no way to keep teaching. Principal Becky must have seen it on his face. She hesitated, then slipped a key into his hand. "The piano in room 114 hasn't been tuned in years. No one will notice if it goes missing for a while." Her meaning was clear. If Jamal wanted to continue, he'd have to do it off the books. He pocketed the key. "How long do we have?" "Until Friday." She glanced at her watch. "And you have another problem. Vance is giving a press conference here at noon." The press conference. Robert Vance stood at a podium in the school courtyard, his suit impeccable despite the heat. Cameras flashed as he spoke about accountability and fiscal responsibility, his smile never wavering. "And while we certainly applaud well-intentioned volunteer efforts," Vance said, smoothing his tie, "we must ensure all programs meet our rigorous academic standards." A reporter raised her hand. "Are you referring to Jamal Carter's music initiative?" Vance's smile tightened. "I'm referring to any unsupervised activity that distracts from our core curriculum." Jamal stood at the back of the crowd, his hands clenched at his sides. He'd heard enough. He turned to leave, and nearly collided with a woman in a crisp linen suit. "Dean Peters." The Juilliard administrator smiled. "Hello, Jamal. I was hoping we might talk." The offer. They sat in Principal Becky's office, the fan oscillating uselessly between them. Dean Peters sipped her iced tea, seemingly unbothered by the heat. "I heard about your program," she said, "and its recent challenges." Jamal wiped sweat from his forehead. "If you're here to say, 'I told you so.'" "Hardly." She set her glass down. "I'm here because we've created a new position at Juilliard. Community Outreach Coordinator. Someone to bridge the gap between institutions like ours and neighborhoods like this." Her gaze sharpened. "I want you to consider it." Jamal stared at her. "I didn't even finish high school. And yet." She gestured to the window, where the sounds of kids practicing scales drifted in from the courtyard. "You've built something remarkable here." The offer hung between them, tantalizing and terrifying. A salary, resources, a platform, but also rules, expectations, compromise. Jamal thought of Elijah's piano gathering dust in the apartment uptown, of the way Marcus's hands shook when he talked about his father. "I need time," he said finally. Dean Peters nodded. "You have until Friday." The discovery. Marcus was elbow-deep in cardboard boxes when Jamal arrived at Elijah's apartment. Sheet music and old photographs covered every surface, the detritus of a life half-remembered. "Find anything?" Jamal asked, picking his way through the mess. Marcus held up a cassette tape, its label yellowed with age. "De Leon Live at Blue Note, 1983. "Never heard of this one." They dug out an ancient tape player from a closet, the plastic cracked with age. When Marcus hit play, the sound that emerged was scratchy, imperfect, and breathtaking. Elijah's piano sang through the tiny speaker, notes tumbling over each other in joyous abandon. This wasn't the technical perfection of his studio recordings. This was something raw, alive. Then, Halfway through, something extraordinary happened. Elijah messed up. A wrong note, glaring and obvious. The crowd gasped. And Elijah, laughed. The sound was rich, warm, utterly unself-conscious. Then he did something even more shocking. He leaned into the mistake, weaving it into the melody until it sounded intentional. Beautiful. The tape ended with thunderous applause. Marcus sat frozen, his eyes bright. I never knew. Jamal understood. All these years, Marcus had been chasing his father's ghost, the flawless performer, the untouchable genius. But the real Elijah? The one on this tape? He'd been human, just like them. The decision. Friday dawned gray and heavy with impending rain. Jamal stood in the empty auditorium, his fingers resting on the piano keys. He played Elijah's piece from the tape, wrong notes and all. When the last chord faded, he pulled out his phone and dialed Dean Peters. I'll take the job, he said. On one condition. The rain started just as Jamal finished loading the last of the borrowed music stands into Principal Becky's car. Fat drops splattered against the pavement, turning the dusty courtyard into a mosaic of dark spots. You're sure about this? Becky asked, wiping water from her forehead. Jamal nodded. The community center said they have space. We'll move everything there tomorrow. A flash of headlights cut through the downpour as a black town car pulled into the lot. The license plate, Vance 1, was impossible to miss. Becky's mouth tightened. Go. I'll handle this. But Jamal stayed where he was as Robert Vance stepped out, his assistant holding an umbrella aloft to shield his tailored suit from the rain. Vance spotted them immediately and strode over, his polished shoes sending up tiny splashes with each step. Principal Becky, he said smoothly. Then his gaze slid to Jamal. Mr. Carter, I hear congratulations are in order. Jamal said nothing. Vance's smile didn't waver. Juilliard's new outreach program, is it? How quaint. He adjusted his cufflinks. Though I must say, I'm surprised they'd hire someone with so little formal training. The barb landed exactly as intended. Jamal felt his shoulders tense, but before he could respond, Becky stepped forward. Was there something you needed, Mr. Vance? We're rather busy. Vance's eyes glittered. Just making sure all school property is accounted for. Given the abrupt end to this little experiment, Jamal's hands curled into fists. The kids still need music, and they'll have it. Vance's tone dripped false sincerity. Through our new partnership with the Vance Conservatory, proper instruction, qualified teachers. His smile sharpened. No amateurs. The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Vance wasn't just cutting off Jamal's program, he was replacing it with his own. The town car's door opened again, and Jamal's stomach dropped as Lucas stepped out into the rain. Vance clapped a hand on Lucas's shoulder. Young Mr. Whitaker here will be helping with the transition. His father and I have come to an understanding. Lucas wouldn't meet Jamal's eyes. Becky's phone buzzed, breaking the tense silence. She glanced at the screen, then at Jamal. We should go. As they walked away, Jamal risked one last look back. Lucas was staring at him, his expression unreadable. Then Vance leaned in to whisper something, and Lucas turned away. The recording. Marcus was waiting at the community center when Jamal arrived, soaked and seething. Without a word, he handed Jamal a towel and played the voicemail that had just come in. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Asterisk, Mr. De Leon, this is Clara Young with NPR Music. We've obtained a copy of your father's Blue Note performance and would love to feature it on our show. Could you call us back? Asterisk. Marcus stared at the phone like it might bite him. It's online. Someone uploaded the whole thing last night. Jamal pulled out his own phone. A quick search revealed the truth. The recording had gone viral. Music blogs were calling it revelatory. Jazz historians were dissecting Elijah's improvisations. And the comments. Asterisk. Why have I never heard this man before? Asterisk. Asterisk. That mistake at 322. Pure genius. Asterisk. Asterisk. What else is out there? Asterisk. Marcus sank onto a folding chair, his face pale. This changes everything. Jamal understood. 4 years, Elijah's legacy had been defined by his disappearance from the spotlight. But this recording showed a different truth, that sometimes walking away could be its own kind of artistry. His phone buzzed. Lucas, asterisk, we need to talk. Alone. Asterisk. The meeting. Lucas chose a diner halfway between Westridge and the city, the kind of place with sticky floors and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration. He was already in a booth when Jamal arrived, 2 mugs steaming between them. I didn't know about Vance's plan, Lucas said without preamble. Not until yesterday. Jamal studied him. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. But you're going along with it. Lucas's hands tightened around his mug. My dad's in trouble. The school board investigation, the bad press. He swallowed hard. Vance offered to make it all go away. If I helped. The pieces clicked into place. Vance wasn't just punishing Jamal. He was collecting pawns. First Lucas. Then who? Jamal leaned forward. Why did you really call me here? Lucas reached into his jacket and slid a flash drive across the table. Because Vance doesn't own me yet. The files. The flash drive contained 3 folders. The first held emails, Vance discussing strategic donations to schools that funneled students into his programs. The second contained contracts, page after page of fine print binding young musicians to Vance's management company. But the third folder stopped Jamal cold. Audio files. Dozens of them. Labeled with dates and locations. All recordings of Vance's star pupils at various competitions and recitals. Marcus frowned. Why would he? Jamal clicked play. The first recording was a violin performance, technically flawless but emotionally sterile. The second, a cellist with shaky pitch. The third, oh God, Marcus whispered, a piano piece, played with obvious nerves. Wrong notes, rushed passages. Then Vance's voice, sharp with disgust. Asterisk, pathetic. Do it again. Asterisk. A sniffle. The sound of someone trying not to cry. Then the piece started over. Jamal scrolled through the files. Each one was the same. Young musicians, raw and imperfect, being broken down and rebuilt in Vance's image. Lucas's final message appeared on screen when they ejected the drive. Asterisk, he records every lesson, every practice, looking for weaknesses. I was next. Asterisk. The plan. Dean Peters listened in silence as Jamal laid it all out. The recordings, the contracts, Vance's systematic dismantling of anything he couldn't control. When he finished, she removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. This is bigger than I anticipated. Marcus, who had been pacing the length of her office, stopped abruptly. You can't let him near those kids. I'm aware. She turned to Jamal. You realize going public with this will paint a target on your back. Jamal thought of Elijah's recording. The joy in those wrong notes. The freedom in that laughter. Let him try, he said. The NPR studio was smaller than Jamal expected. Just a cramped room with microphones and soundproofing foam on the walls. He sat across from the host, Clara Young, while Marcus fidgeted in the corner. The air smelled like coffee and old electronics. You're live in 3, the producer said through their headphones. 2, 1. Clara leaned forward, her voice warm but precise. Today we're discussing the rediscovery of jazz pianist Elijah De Leon, whose 1983 Blue Note performance has taken the internet by storm. With me are his son, Marcus De Leon, and protege Jamal Carter. Gentlemen, welcome. Marcus's knee bounced under the table. Jamal could see the sweat beading at his temples despite the studio's cool air. Clara didn't miss it. Marcus, this must be difficult. Your father walked away from fame at the height of his career. Why? A long pause. Then Marcus exhaled sharply. He used to say music stopped being fun. His voice cracked. I never understood what he meant until now. The producer signaled for Jamal to speak. That recording changed everything, Jamal said. It showed the human behind the legend. The mistakes. The laughter. That's what makes it beautiful. Clara's eyes gleamed. Speaking of mistakes, Your own unorthodox journey has sparked conversation. From Westridge Prep to Juilliard's outreach program. Always on your own terms. Jamal's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Music isn't about perfection. It's about truth. The interview lasted 20 minutes. By the end, Marcus was crying openly, and Clara had abandoned her script to ask about Elijah's unpublished compositions. As they left the studio, Jamal checked his phone. 37 missed calls. All from Principal Becky. The fallout. Westridge Prep was in chaos. Reporters crowded the front steps, their cameras trained on the school doors. Becky intercepted Jamal and Marcus at the teacher's entrance, her usually impeccable braids coming loose around her face. "It's a feeding frenzy," she hissed, ushering them into her office. "Vance resigned from the board an hour ago. The Whitakers are next." Marcus frowned. "Lucas. Safe." Becky handed Jamal a newspaper. "Thanks to this." The headline blared, "Music mogul's empire built on broken dreams." Underneath, a photo of Lucas Whitaker looking younger and more vulnerable than Jamal had ever seen him. The quote jumped out, "Asterisk, he records your failures. Then he owns them. Asterisk." Jamal's throat tightened. He hadn't realized Lucas would go this far. Becky's phone rang. She listened briefly, then covered the receiver. "CBS wants to interview you too. Today." Marcus shook his head. "No more press." "Not us," Becky said. "The kids." The performance. They held it in the courtyard where Vance had given his press conference just days before. 23 students from Jamal's scrap music program sat on folding chairs, their instruments gleaming in the afternoon sun. A crowd had gathered, parents, teachers, reporters with their cameras ready. Lucas stood off to the side, his posture rigid. When Jamal approached, he didn't meet his eyes. "You didn't have to do that," Jamal said quietly. "The interview." Lucas's jaw worked. "Yes, I did." Then Becky called for quiet, and the children began to play. It wasn't perfect. The violins screeched. The flutes squeaked. The percussion section rushed the beat. But the joy, the sheer unbridled joy on those young faces, was undeniable. As the last note faded, the crowd erupted. Not polite applause, but cheers, whistles, tears. A reporter shoved a microphone in Jamal's face. "What's next for your students?" Jamal looked at the beaming children, then at Lucas, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "This is just the beginning," Jamal said. The visitor. The knock came late that night, just as Jamal was packing for his move to Juilliard. He opened the door to find an elderly black woman standing on the stoop, her silver hair coiled in an elegant bun. She wore a tailored suit and carried a leather portfolio under one arm. "Jamal Carter," she said, her voice rich with authority. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Cole. May I come in?" Something about her seemed familiar, but Jamal couldn't place it. He stepped aside. Dr. Cole settled onto the couch with the grace of a queen holding court. She opened the portfolio to reveal sheet music, handwritten, the notes flowing across the page like water. "Elijah wrote this for me," she said, shortly before he disappeared. Jamal's breath caught. The composition was stunning, complex yet accessible, technical yet emotional. Dr. Cole smiled at his reaction. "I was his teacher, long before Marcus was born." She traced a finger over the music. "He was much like you. Brilliant, stubborn, determined to do things his own way." Jamal's mother emerged from the kitchen, her eyes widening at their guest. "Dr. Cole?" From the conservatory, the pieces clicked. Evelyn Cole wasn't just Elijah's teacher, she was a legend in her own right, the first black woman to chair a major music school. Dr. Cole handed Jamal the sheet music. "I'd like you to have this, and to know you're not alone in this fight." Jamal turned the pages carefully. On the last sheet, in Elijah's messy scrawl, "For E, who taught me to hear the spaces between." The legacy. Marcus arrived just as Dr. Cole was leaving. When he saw her, he froze in the doorway. "You," he breathed. Dr. Cole cupped his face with surprising tenderness. "You look just like him." Then she turned to Jamal. "Remember, music is a conversation, not a competition." After she left, Marcus sank onto the couch, his face ashen. She was his first love. Before my mother. Jamal stared at the sheet music in his hands. Suddenly, Elijah's words took on new meaning. The spaces between. The unsaid things. The love and loss that shaped every note. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's ring. I think it's time I started wearing this. Outside, a car door slammed. Then another. Voices rose in the street. Excited, urgent. Jamal peered through the curtains. Reporters. Dozens of them, their cameras trained on the house. Marcus groaned. What now? Jamal's phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking, Juilliard announces Elijah De Leon Memorial Scholarship for underrepresented musicians. Underneath, a photo of Jamal and Marcus from the NPR interview. Jamal turned to Marcus. Looks like we're not done yet. The morning of the scholarship announcement, Jamal woke to a pounding on his front door. He stumbled through the darkened apartment, the hardwood floors cold beneath his bare feet. Through the peephole he saw Marcus, his face pale under the porch light. Open up, Marcus hissed. Now. Jamal unlocked the door. Marcus shoved a newspaper into his hands. The headline screamed, Juilliard's new diversity scholarship funded by Vance money. Jamal's stomach dropped. Below the fold, a quote from Robert Vance himself. Asterisk, I've always supported young artists, regardless of background. This partnership is a natural extension of that commitment. Asterisk. Marcus paced the narrow hallway, his hands shaking. They sold us out. Dean Peters, the board, everyone. Jamal scanned the article, his pulse pounding in his ears. According to the report, Vance had quietly donated half the scholarship's endowment through a shell corporation. The terms. Final say on all recipients. They're using Elijah's name, Marcus choked out. After everything. The clock on the stove read 4:37 a.m. Somewhere in the city, Dr. Cole would be waking to this news. The students who'd trusted Jamal would be waking to it. Jamal reached for his phone. We pull out. Marcus stopped pacing. What? We go public. Say we had no knowledge of Vance's involvement. Refused to endorse it. And then what? Marcus's voice cracked. This was our chance to make things right. To honor my fathers. A car door slammed outside. Then another. Through the curtains, Jamal saw the flicker of camera lights. The vultures had arrived. The walkout. Dean Peters' office was smaller than Jamal remembered, the walls pressing in around them as she laid out the damage control plan. You'll issue a joint statement with Vance, she said, her manicured fingers tapping the desk. Expressing gratitude for his generosity. Marcus made a strangled noise. You can't be serious. The scholarship stands, Dean Peters continued as if he hadn't spoken. The terms are non-negotiable. Jamal studied her. The perfectly tailored suit, the immaculate bun, the steely resolve in her eyes. This was the woman who'd championed him, who'd created a position just for him. And now she was folding. Why? Jamal asked quietly. Dean Peters hesitated. Then she opened her desk drawer and slid a folder across the desk. Inside, financial statements. Pages of red ink and plummeting endowment numbers. Juilliard isn't immune to market forces, she said. Vance's donation saves 30 faculty positions. 50 need-based scholarships. She met Jamal's eyes. Sometimes progress requires compromise. Jamal stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. Not this kind. Marcus didn't move. What about Elijah's unpublished works? The ones you wanted for the archive? Dean Peters' expression softened. Marcus, be reasonable. No. Marcus rose slowly, his voice trembling with quiet fury. You don't get his music. Not now. Not ever. The walkout made headlines. The alternative. Dr. Cole's brownstone smelled like old books and lemon polish. She listened without interruption as Jamal and Marcus laid out the situation. Her gnarled hands folded atop Elijah's sheet music. When they finished, she stood with surprising grace and crossed to an antique writing desk. From its drawer, she produced a checkbook. How much do you need? Marcus gaped. We can't ask you to. You're not asking. Dr. Cole's pen hovered over the paper. I've been waiting 60 years for someone worthy of Elijah's legacy. Her sharp eyes flicked to Jamal. Shall we start with 1 million? The number hung in the air, dizzying in its magnitude. Jamal's phone buzzed. Lucas, check your email. The files. The attachment was a single audio file, labeled only with yesterday's date. Jamal hit play. Vance's voice filled the room, crisp and clear. Asterisk, the De Leon boy will come around once the scholarship launches. His father's reputation is mud. No one else will touch those compositions. Asterisk. A second voice, nasal and unfamiliar. Asterisk, and the Carter kid? Asterisk. Vance's laugh sent chills down Jamal's spine. Asterisk, please. He's a flash in the pan. Another diversity hire. Asterisk. The recording continued, Vance detailing his plans to acquire Elijah's unpublished works through the scholarship's fine print. Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. Dr. Cole's lips thinned. That man always did mistake power for permanence. Jamal replayed the last line in his head. Diversity hire. The word stung more than he wanted to admit. His phone buzzed again. Lucas, calling this time. Jamal answered. How did you get this? Lucas's breathing was ragged. I wore a wire. My dad's lawyers are filing the paperwork now. A pause. They're coming for him, Jamal. For real this time. The announcement. They held a press conference at Dr. Cole's conservatory, beneath a portrait of a young Elijah De Leon that Jamal had never seen before. The room was packed, reporters, students, even a few Juilliard faculty who'd quietly defected. Marcus spoke first, his voice steadier than Jamal had heard in weeks. Today we announce the Elijah De Leon Foundation, an independent scholarship for musicians who don't fit the mold. Dr. Cole took the podium next. We begin with 5 full-ride fellowships. No strings. No hidden agendas. Then it was Jamal's turn. He adjusted the microphone, his mouth dry. Music isn't about perfection. It's not about prestige. He glanced at Marcus. It's about having the courage to play your own notes. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, as the crowd mingled, Dean Peters approached. She looked older somehow, the lines around her mouth more pronounced. I hope you'll still consider the outreach position, she said quietly. On your own terms. Jamal studied her, the regret in her eyes, the pride she couldn't quite hide. He thought of the students counting on him, the ones who needed to hear that their wrong notes mattered too. We'll talk, he said. Not yes, not no, just we'll talk. The legacy. The gala was Dr. Cole's idea, a fundraiser featuring Elijah's rediscovered compositions. They booked a historic Harlem jazz club, the same one where Elijah had played his first professional gig. Backstage, Marcus adjusted Jamal's tie with uncharacteristic fussiness. Nervous? Jamal shook his head. You? Marcus hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's ring. For the first time, he slid it onto his finger. Let's give them a show. The spotlight was blinding as Jamal took the stage. The crowd blurred into a sea of expectant faces. At the piano, he took a deep breath and played the first note Elijah had ever taught him. It wasn't perfect. It was better. Epilogue. The Foundation's first class included a jazz drummer from Chicago, a hip-hop violinist from Atlanta, and a 12-year-old Prodigy who composed symphonies on her tablet. Lucas got into Berkeley on his own merit. Dean Peters resigned from Juilliard to head a new arts initiative. And on rainy afternoons, when the practice rooms emptied, you could sometimes hear Marcus playing his father's music, wrong notes and all. As for Jamal, he kept teaching.